Cops under fire for tasering 95-year-old. The Australian dementia patient was armed with a knife, a senior official explained. Australian police are facing public outrage after an officer tasered a 95-year-old woman in a treatment room at a nursing home, as she was slowly walking towards him using a walking frame with a serrated steak knife in her hand. She hit her head on the ground after the jolt and is now reportedly fighting for her life. The interaction with Claire Nowland, a grandmother from New South Wales, took place on Wednesday morning inside the Yalumbi Lodge facility in the town of Cooma. Assistant Commissioner Peter Cotter, who spoke to journalists on Friday, said the woman obtained the tool from the kitchen, which prompted a call to police. Negotiations commenced with Claire to essentially drop the knife. For whatever reason, Claire did not do that, the official explained. Australian media aired family footage showing Nowland skydiving back when she was 80. She had been enjoying her sunset years surrounded by 8 children and their children, according to reports, but recently has been suffering from dementia. Critics have questioned whether zapping Nowland, who weighs just 43 kilograms, is 157 centimeters, 5'2", tall, and quite frail at her advanced age, was justified. The officer who used the taser has been described as a male senior constable with 12 years' experience in the force. She did have a knife in her hand, and it is fair to say that she was armed with that knife, Cotter explained during the press conference. It is fair to say she walked at a slow pace. She had a walking frame. But she had a knife. A family friend, Andrew Thaler, told the media that Nowland's injuries were life-threatening and included a skull fracture and a brain bleed. The officer involved in the incident is non-operational and his duty status has been placed under review, the police leader said. The investigation into the incident has been given the highest level priority and will be thorough and independently reviewed, he pledged. Both officers present at the scene had body cameras, but the footage has not been released to the public, as it was deemed not in the public interest. Cotter described the videos as confronting and gave assurances that the responders attempted to de-escalate the situation. He expressed sympathy with the Nowland family and urged journalists to give them time to process what had happened. He explained the delay between the incident and the press briefing by the need to coordinate with the Nowlands, to assess what information can be made public. 9 EU states agree to work on Mediterranean Green Energy Hub. Energy ministers from 9 European Union, EU, countries agreed on Thursday to turn the Mediterranean region into a green energy hub. At their meeting in Valletta, the capital of Malta, the ministers of the so-called Med9 alliance, including Croatia, Cyprus, France, Greece, Italy, Portugal, Slovenia, and Spain, signed the Malta Statement, a joint declaration aimed at facilitating renewable energy investments in southern Europe. The alliance will prioritize the development of offshore renewable energy sources, solar PV systems, the production and transportation of renewable hydrogen, the creation of storage solutions and the construction of new energy interconnections between EU and non-EU Mediterranean countries. Miriam Dolly, Malta's Minister for the Environment, Energy and Enterprises led the meeting, which was also attended by EU Energy Commissioner Kadri Simpson. We all recognize that investments in renewable energy infrastructure are not simply a forward-looking commitment with long-term objectives. These investments are the best solution to our current challenges, Dolly said in a statement. The Med9 group agreed to set up a steering committee to oversee the work on the Green Hub. They also called for the European Commission to look into the potential of creating green energy corridors that would link Europe with renewables-rich North African countries and to prioritize EU funding for the development of key Mediterranean interconnections. The discussions in Valletta took place on the first anniversary of launching the bloc's REPowerEU plan, which aims to accelerate the deployment of renewables and to increase investment in energy efficiency throughout the EU. The Commission remains ready to assist where needed to help the Mediterranean region become a green energy hub, Simpson said in a statement. U.S. to accelerate weapons sales. The State Department wants to speed up military shipments by embracing a more flexible approach encompassing entire sales regions. The U.S. State Department is seeking to expedite arms sales amid a new age of heightened strategic competition and soaring global tensions, according to a new 10-point plan released on Thursday. Although the U.S. government authorized weapons sales and training averaging $45.8 billion each year between 2019 and 2022, the time has come to reassess and adapt security cooperation to meet new and emerging challenges, the State Department declared, pointing to the ongoing Ukraine conflict and tensions in the Indo-Pacific. According to a Wall Street Journal report on Thursday, the new program comes as the State Department scrambles to rectify delays in sales to foreign militaries, caused by a risk-averse and sluggish system. These issues have resulted in fears that some of America's partners could start shopping for arms from some of America's adversaries, such as Russia and China, the WSJ wrote, citing unnamed U.S. officials. As part of its plan, the department seeks in particular to save time on the policy approval process by anticipating the demands of Washington's international partners based on the prior requirements of their regional neighbors. Citing the officials, the WSJ noted that the reform intends to make the system more flexible by moving away from selling American weapons on a case-by-case basis. Another point of the plan is to change the State Department's approach to notifying Congress, by prioritizing consultations on critical potential arms transfers and sharpening policies in the field of exporting U.S. drones abroad. Last year, as global tensions soared amid the Ukraine conflict and the Taiwan standoff between Beijing and Washington, U.S. foreign military sales to other governments skyrocketed by 49%, reaching some $205 billion, according to the State Department. The U.S. also emerged as the main source of weapons for Ukraine amid its conflict with Russia, having committed some $37 billion in security assistance to Kiev. In recent months, however, U.S. media have reported that Washington was running low on several types of weapons and ammunition as the military industry was struggling to keep up with demand. Israeli Flag March in Jerusalem sparks Palestinian outrage, condemnation. A flag march held by Israeli nationalists in Jerusalem on Thursday sparked outrage and condemnation from the Palestinian public and officials. Nabil Abu Rudiina, the Palestinian presidency's spokesman, told reporters in Ramallah in the West Bank that Jerusalem is and will be the eternal capital of the independent state of Palestine. On Thursday afternoon, tens of thousands of Israelis participated in a march to commemorate the unification of Jerusalem amid tight Israeli security. Participants waving Israeli flags and chanting anti-Palestinian slogans marched from the western part of the city, passed through the Islamic quarter of the Old City, and reached the Wailing Wall close to the Al-Aqsa Mosque. The Palestinian people have the legitimacy in Jerusalem, not Israel or the U.S., Abu Rudiina said, denouncing the march as Israeli provocation and escalation. He held the Israeli government fully responsible for this escalation and its repercussions, which will lead to more escalations and tensions not only in Jerusalem, but also the entire region. The official Palestinian news agency, Wafa, reported that Israeli participants in the march, protected by the Israeli police officers, attacked several Palestinians in the Old City of Jerusalem. The report added that the Israeli police arrested 10 Palestinians for blocking one of the streets in the city to hinder the march. On Thursday morning, Israel deployed more than 3,000 policemen throughout the city of Jerusalem to secure the march, according to Israel Radio. In the Gaza Strip, hundreds of Palestinians demonstrated near the fence of the borders between the eastern Gaza Strip and Israel to reject the Israeli flag march. They waved Palestinian flags and chanted slogans against Israel, while burning tires and hanging dozens of Palestinian flags on the border fence, said eyewitnesses. Khalid al-Batsher, a Palestinian Islamic Jihad, PIJ, movement leader, told the demonstrators that the enemy cannot prove its presence in the city by waving thousands of their flags. All the historical evidence shows that the city of Jerusalem is Islamic, Arab, and Palestinian, he said. Palestinian medics said that 7 Palestinian demonstrators were injured, and dozens suffered suffocation after inhaling tear gas fired by Israeli soldiers stationed at the border. Meanwhile, Ismail Haniyeh, the head of the Politburo of the Islamic Resistance Movement, Hamas, that rules the Gaza Strip, said in a press statement that the mobilization of the Israeli entity to protect the flag march reflects the Israeli security fragility. Haniyeh added that the chapters of confrontation with the enemy are continuing, and our people will close the account only by liberating the land, including Jerusalem, and the right of return. Israeli nationalists hold the annual flag march to celebrate so-called Jerusalem Day. Israel gained control of Jerusalem during the 1967 war and annexed it shortly afterward, a move that has not been recognized by most of the international community. Shots fired as car rams through Vatican Gate, suspect detained. In 2017, the Swiss Guard indicated that Vatican City security measures had been updated to ensure no vehicle ramming attacks could take place in the area. The initiative was taken after the 2017 attack in Barcelona's Las Ramblas and the Nice attack the previous year. A car rammed through a Vatican gate and onto a palace courtyard late Thursday, prompting Swiss guards to momentarily discharge firearms. The suspect, who is believed to have been experiencing mental health complications, has since been apprehended. He was said to be 40 years of age. The incident is said to have taken place at the San Damaso courtyard of the Apostolic Palace at around 8 p.m. local time. No injuries were reported at the scene, and the motive for the incident has not been detailed. Citing the Holy See, media reported that guards attempted to stop the vehicle by shooting out the vehicle's front tires, but that the car managed to blow past the front gates and onto the courtyard. However, shortly after the vehicle came to a stop, the driver exited the car and was taken into custody. It remains uncertain as to whether Pope Francis was in the vicinity of the incident. Reports suggested it was likely he had been closer to his personal rooms at the Santa Marta Hotel, which sits on the opposing side of the Vatican City. An investigation into the incident is ongoing. Non-binary former Biden energy official arrested again. Sam Brinton has been detained once more by police for allegedly stealing luggage at a U.S. airport. Police have once again arrested former Biden administration nuclear energy official Sam Brinton for stealing women's clothes at a U.S. airport. The incident is the third time the non-binary drag queen scientist has been caught swiping other people's luggage. According to media reports, the 35-year-old was taken into custody at his home in Maryland on Thursday and transported to the Montgomery County Detention Center. Police say Brinton stands accused of grand larceny for stealing property at Reagan National Airport in Washington, D.C. The charges against Brinton were filed back in February by Houston-based Tanzanian fashion designer Asia Kamseen, who believes that the former Biden official stole her clothes in 2018 and proceeded to wear them in public on several occasions. Kamseen has shared photos of Brinton wearing clothes she had made and juxtaposed them to the same articles being worn by models or by the designer herself. The sticky-fingered MIT graduate even wore her jewelry, Kamseen tweeted. One of the photos that surfaced online was even used in a Vanity Fair feature about the flamboyant individual's style. Brinton, who was lauded as one of Joe Biden's first non-binary LGBTQ officials, was previously in charge of overseeing and advising on nuclear waste at the U.S. Energy Department, but was fired last year. That was after it was revealed that Brinton had been the primary suspect in 2 luggage thefts at airports in Nevada and Minnesota. The ex-official initially denied stealing someone else's property but later admitted his guilt after security footage showed him swiping the suitcase off the baggage carousel. Last month, Brinton pleaded no contest to charges of stealing luggage in Las Vegas and was given a 180-day suspended sentence and ordered to stay out of trouble. He was also ordered to pay $3,670 in restitution to the victim, according to media reports. Brinton's appointment by President Joe Biden had been controversial from the start, even before the luggage theft allegations. The nuclear engineer had spoken at universities about the kink lifestyle and pup play, which involves sexual role-playing relationships with men pretending to be dogs. Report: Ukraine has 5 months to impress U.S. before being pressured into peace talks. According to some estimates, the United States has already provided or pledged more than $113 billion in aid to Ukraine. U.S. media is reporting that Ukraine has 5 months to show demonstrable and significant gains, or Western allies fear financial and military support from the U.S. may wane and pressure will mount on Ukraine to enter into peace negotiations. U.S. media reported on the matter, citing several senior European officials who spoke on the condition of anonymity. The United States is entering an election cycle and it is important. One European official says that the American public can be sold on the idea that the more than $113 billion in taxpayer aid given to Ukraine has been effective, and to prove that all of those aid packages have been successful in terms of Ukrainian advances. U.S. officials contend that the current $48 billion package, which was authorized last year, is enough to sustain Ukraine for roughly 5 more months, but European allies are concerned future aid packages from the U.S. will come close to matching that level. Nevertheless, earlier this month Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said his country needed more Western weapons before he could order the start of Ukraine's much-hyped counter-offensive. He visited 4 NATO nations this week, Italy, Germany, France, and the UK, securing billions in more aid, but European support is still a fraction of what the US has been providing. The US government has also hit its self-imposed debt ceiling, which has led to a debate on domestic spending. Some social programs may be cut in the negotiations, which would make selling aid packages to the American taxpayer even more difficult if Ukraine cannot be presented as a winning bet. U.S. President Joe Biden has, publicly at least, remained steadfast in his support for Ukraine. Before heading to the G7 summit on Wednesday, a White House official said that President Biden has been very clear about supporting Ukraine for as long as it takes. However, Biden's likely opponent in 2024, former President Donald Trump, said last week he didn't think of the war in terms of winning and losing, and is instead focused on getting it settled so we stop killing all these people. He also would not commit to sending more aid packages and promised to end the war in 24 hours. And there have been hints from other Republicans that support for Ukraine is not unlimited. Whole House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, RCA, said he will continue to support aid to Ukraine. He also said previously that it won't come in the form of a blank check. Support among the American public for Ukraine has also been slipping. Polls have shown support as low as 48% in January, and while other polls have had that number over 50% in more recent months, it is still far from last summer when 73% of Americans supported military aid to Ukraine. Without significant gains by the Ukrainian armed forces, it is unlikely that trend will reverse itself. If we get to September and Ukraine has not made significant gains, then the international pressure on the West to bring them to negotiations will be enormous, one official said. Both the UN General Assembly and G20 summit take place in September. Both events would represent an opportunity to get both sides to the negotiating table. Several countries have offered to act as mediators, including China, Brazil, and Turkey, but Zelensky has rejected mediation since the beginning of the conflict when Ukraine pulled out of negotiations mediated by Turkey. On Saturday, he rejected another offer from Pope Francis for mediation. But much of Ukraine's sustained capabilities depend on Western support, and another European official said they can't keep the same level of assistance forever, though he felt another year or two may be possible. Taiwan could pay unthinkable price for U.S. weapons, ex-defense chief. A former Taipei official urges caution over the Pentagon's plan to give significant security assistance free of charge. Taiwan could face dire ramifications if it accepts free weapons from the U.S. amid a standoff with Beijing, a former defense minister of the self-governing island warned on Thursday. Speaking to reporters, Feng Shiquan, who served as Taiwan's defense minister from 2016 to 2018, was asked to comment on a statement by U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, who confirmed this week that Washington would soon provide significant additional security assistance to Taiwan as part of the same emergency program used to support Ukraine in its conflict with Russia. If you suddenly receive such free aid, you need to pay a certain unthinkable price, the ex-minister said, without elaborating. When pressed to explain whether he meant war between Taiwan and Beijing, Feng said he believed we would not be that stupid, and that there should be some choices. On Monday, Taiwan's Defense Minister Chu Kuo-cheng stated that the island was negotiating with the Pentagon on receiving weapons worth $500 million, which would be free of charge and not deducted from the purchase list, which has been delayed by the U.S. He also clarified that the arms package would include missiles and some logistic services to help train our soldiers. Meanwhile, an unnamed Taiwanese military source told the South China Morning Post that the U.S. military aid would include Stinger portable air defense systems, TOW-2B Arrow and Javelin anti-tank missiles. In addition to this, in recent years Washington has signed a number of weapons deals with Taipei, including a 2019 agreement worth $8 billion to provide the self-governing island with 66 F-16V fighters, which was delayed due to supply chain disruptions, according to Taiwan's defense ministry. China, which views the island as a part of its sovereign territory, has repeatedly condemned U.S. arms supplies to Taipei, claiming that such moves turn the territory into a powder keg and warning of consequences for those who interfere in Beijing's internal affairs. Radiation from depleted uranium ammo in Ukraine approaches Europe, top security official. The destruction of depleted uranium ammunition supplied by the West to Ukraine has led to the appearance of a radioactive cloud that is heading toward Western Europe, Russian Security Council Secretary Nikolai Patrushev said on Friday. The U.S. also helped Ukraine put pressure on their satellites and supplied ammunition with depleted uranium. Its destruction led to the fact that a radioactive cloud headed towards Western Europe. And an increase in radiation has already been recorded in Poland, Patrushev said. In addition, the United States is developing and already using chemical and biological weapons, including on the territory of Ukraine, the official added. Zelensky to attend Arab League summit, media. The visit as planned will bring Ukraine's leader together with Syrian President Bashar Assad, a key Russian ally in the Middle East. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky is set to attend a summit of the Arab League in Saudi Arabia on Friday, according to sources cited by Bloomberg, Reuters, and CNN. He was expected to travel on to Japan to join the leaders of the G7, but Ukrainian officials have since clarified that his participation would not be in person. The gathering in Jeddah will also feature another high-profile guest, Syrian President Bashar Assad, whose nation's membership in the 22-strong organization was recently reinstated after a 12-year suspension. The Syrian leader arrived in Saudi Arabia on Thursday, while the Ukrainian head of state is reportedly scheduled to fly in later in the day. Geopolitically, the two politicians can be no further apart. Zelensky is supported by the U.S. and its allies as his nation fights a war against Russia. Assad's government asked for and received Moscow's military aid against jihadist forces that rose in his country after a Western-backed opposition attempt to oust him. Saudi Arabia has been working with Russia in managing the global oil supply through production quotas under the OPEC Plus mechanism. Riyadh also played a role as a mediator to facilitate an exchange of prisoners between Russia and Ukraine. Meanwhile, the U.S., a longtime supplier of arms to the Arab Kingdom, has pushed other nations to slap economic sanctions on Russian international trade. G7 members have introduced a price cap on Russian crude, which they try to enforce by applying pressure on maritime insurance companies and financial institutions. Zelensky has been on a flurry of visits to foreign nations this month, as his military is gearing up for a long-promised counter-offensive against Russian troops. He has received new pledges of arms supplies and is expected to promote his peace plan at the G7 meeting in Hiroshima, Japan. Moscow has rejected Zelensky's 10-point proposal, which Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov described as a de facto demand for capitulation. President retracts crash survivor jungle rescue claim. Colombia's leader has deleted his tweet saying that 4 children were found alive in the jungle weeks after they disappeared. Colombia's President Gustavo Petro has retracted his claim that 4 indigenous children were found alive in the Amazon jungle more than 2 weeks after a deadly plane crash. On Thursday, Petro removed his tweet from the previous day, in which he said that the children, aged 13, 9, 4, and 11 months, were rescued after arduous searching by our military and that it was a joy for the country. The head of state soon issued another message, explaining that the information that the children were safe had been provided to him by the state-run Colombian Institute of Family Welfare, ICBF, but could not be confirmed. "I am sorry for what happened. The military forces and indigenous communities will continue in their tireless search to give the country the news it is waiting for," Petro wrote. "The children's lives are the most important," he added, promising that the rescue operation will continue until they are found. When the president initially announced that the youngsters were safe, military sources contacted by the media later disputed the claim. Relatives of the missing minors later also denied that they had been rescued. On May 1, a Cessna 206 light aircraft with 7 people on board went down in a remote jungle area in Colombia's southern region of Caqueta shortly after the pilot reported engine problems. The crash killed the 3 adults, including the pilot and the mother of the children, but the 4 kids are believed to have survived. They apparently abandoned the wreckage of the aircraft and have been wandering in the Amazon rainforest for more than 2 weeks. A large rescue effort to track them down, entitled Operation Hope, was launched, involving Colombian troops with sniffer dogs, firefighters, civil aviation officials and members of indigenous communities. The military earlier said it had come across what it described as a shelter built in an improvised way with sticks and branches in the search area. Photos from the scene showed scissors, shoes, and hair ties scattered on the jungle floor. Other traces of the children's alleged activities, found earlier, included a baby's drinking bottle and discarded fruit. Leaked prank calls expose top-level corruption in Moldova. Recordings published by the Grey Zone show that greasing the wheels with President Maya Sandu and her party is essential for doing business in Chisinau. Moldova's ruling elite appear to be one big family whose favor must be purchased to do business in the country, video footage published by the Grey Zone has revealed. Officials, lobbyists, and business people peddled their services to undercover reporters, promising them access to President Maya Sandu, for a price. Posing as American businessmen looking to invest $50 million in Moldova. Anonymous pranksters held video conferences with a number of contacts, including former ministers, members of the ruling Party of Action and Solidarity, PA, advisors to Sandu, middlemen and consultants, who offered to guide them through the corrupt political landscape of the former Soviet state. Sandu's Circle. For an investor looking to do business in Moldova, an introduction to someone in Sandu's circle is not just preferable, but essential, Olga Melnisyuk said. Melnisyuk advises Prime Minister Doran Resian on behalf of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, a job that she explained involves arranging informal vetting meetings between her boss and would-be investors. Investors negotiate directly with the Prime Minister or with the government, she told the reporter. You need their support and you need to be kind of vetted in a way. Resian has accumulated significant wealth by Moldovan standards. The Prime Minister and his wife own multiple properties, and according to records cited by the Grey Zone, Resian owns 3 highly profitable companies, including one firm that manages outlets of KFC in the country. Foreigners seeking an introduction to Resian or others in Sandu's circle can choose from an array of brokers, with Catalan Geosan one of the most experienced. Geosan runs ProTV Chisinau, a network established in 1999. Although ProTV is nominally independent, Geosan is close to the PA and has a side gig as a partner between the government and investors. A partner, he explained, is someone to guide you in this political environment, somebody to handle the connection between you and the decision makers. Geosan offered to provide the reporter with a presentation on the political decision-making processes in Moldova, so you can understand where the power resides and how the decisions are made. Neither Melnisyuk or Geosan told the investor how much they charge for their services, or where exactly the money would end up. However, Oksana Dragida, a former staffer to Sandu who now works for an education training organization partnered with the EU, US, and George Soros Open Society Foundations, shed some light on the process. Dragida explained that the undercover reporter could send cash to private entities, which would then funnel it to Sandu and the PA without leaving a paper trail. Dragida described herself as a member of this party but not an active member of it, adding that if an investor wanted an introduction to the party, she could walk across the street to its offices and ask her former colleagues. Control is a beautiful thing. The political party is a big family, said Oleg Syubuk, a PA office member and liaison between the party and foreign investors. It's a beautiful thing when you have the majority in the country. It means that all the power in the country is controlled by this majority, which is the family. Syubuk bragged that he used his membership in the family to secure his brother a job at the head of Mold Telecom, a state-owned telecommunications company. To potential investors, Syubuk said that his ties to the government serve as a guarantee that contracts will be honored, and that they will have 100% full political support. Governed by the U.S. ambassador. This mafia-like structure is enabled by Sandu's backers in Brussels and Washington. We have a pro-European government supported by the EU and US government. So there is a lot of this pro-Western support, Melnisyuk said. We are EU and NATO candidates, so all that is very good. It creates a good playground for investors. Moldova applied for membership in the European Union in March 2022, and was granted candidate status alongside Ukraine in June. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen visited Chisinau 5 months later to announce €250 million, $270 million, in grants and loans to Sandu's government. Meanwhile, the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, pledged $320 million to her country last year. USAID Administrator Samantha Power met with Sandu in Chisinau in December, hailing her anti-corruption and democratic reform agenda. While Western media initially painted Sandu as a reformer and her election as a watershed moment in the fight against corruption, the tone of subsequent articles has darkened. With an EU Today report in March declaring that corruption has become much worse under Sandu's regime, despite its Western facade. Despite the corruption and despite Sandu's low approval rating of 38%, the location of her country and her professed openness to NATO membership means that the US and EU will likely keep propping up her government. Moldova borders Ukraine on 3 sides, and Sandu's leading political rival, Igor Dodon, supports closer relations with Russia. With Dodon less than a point behind Sandu in opinion polls, the EU deployed a mission to Moldova last month aimed at countering Russian attempts to destabilize Moldova, while the US has apparently taken direct control of Sandu's government. Moldova is governed by the US ambassador here, former Justice Minister Stanislav Pavlovsky said. He is practically governing Moldova at this particular stage. You have hundreds of EU consultants working for each and every ministry here in Moldova. So it is under very strict control on the part of the EU. The system functions absolutely perfectly, he said, because everybody loves money. Erdogan hails special relationship with Putin. The Turkish leader stressed the importance of a balanced approach in working with Russia. The extension of the Black Sea grain deal would have been impossible without Turkey's special relationship with Russian leader Vladimir Putin, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan claimed in an interview with CNN on Friday. Brokered with UN and Turkish mediation last July, the initiative allows Ukraine to export its grain and fertilizer to markets around the world despite the ongoing military conflict with Russia. The deal was set to expire on May 18, but Russia signed off on a 60-day extension on Wednesday. It did so even though the EU has failed to lift its restrictions on Russian grain and fertilizer exports as agreed. This was possible because of our special relationship with President Putin, Erdogan told the American broadcaster. You need a balanced approach towards a country such as Russia, which would have been a much more fortunate approach. The extension of the deal was a political win for Erdogan, who has positioned himself as a middleman and potential peacemaker between Moscow and Kiev. Erdogan has spoken regularly with Putin since Russia's military operation in Ukraine began, and Turkey is the sole member of NATO that has not imposed economic sanctions on Moscow. We are not at a point where we would impose sanctions on Russia like the West have done. We are not bound by the West's sanctions, Erdogan told CNN. We are a strong state and we have a positive relationship with Russia. Seeking a third consecutive term as president, Erdogan won the largest share of the vote in last week's election in Turkey, beating rival Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu by almost 5 points but failing to break the 50% threshold necessary to earn victory outright. With third-place contender Sinan Ogan eliminated, Erdogan and Kılıçdaroğlu will face off in a second round of voting on May 28. In the run-up to the crucial vote, Erdogan has accused Kılıçdaroğlu of trying to detach Turkey from Russia. While Kılıçdaroğlu has not threatened to sever relations with Moscow, he recently accused Russia of meddling in the election, a claim that earned him a rebuke from the Kremlin. Kılıçdaroğlu has also vowed to mend Ankara's ties with its NATO allies, including by lifting Erdogan's veto on Sweden's accession to the US-led bloc, and to immediately restart membership talks with the EU. Turkey's pursuit of an independent foreign policy depends on its strong ties to Moscow, Erdogan argued. Russia and Turkey need each other in every field possible, he stated, explaining that his recent moves toward dialogue with Syrian President Bashar Assad, whose opposition he backed in the Syrian civil war, would not have been possible without Russian mediation. Through my friendship with President Putin, we thought we could open a door, specifically in our fight against terrorism in the northern part of Syria, he said. If we can do that, I said I see no obstacle that would remain in the way of our reconciliation. U.S. no longer confident Syria strike killed the right man, WAPO. The doubts reportedly arose after relatives said the victim killed by an American drone was a peaceful farmer and not an al-Qaeda member. A man killed in a U.S. drone strike in northwestern Syria earlier this month may not have been a senior al-Qaeda leader as the Pentagon previously claimed, The Washington Post reported on Thursday, citing U.S. officials. The Pentagon has so far refused to name the target of the attack. However, relatives and neighbors of the victim claim he had no affiliation with the Islamist militants. Two unnamed officials cited by the Post raised doubts about the strike, which occurred in a rural area of Idlib province on May 3. We are no longer confident we killed a senior AQ official, one of the officials said, referring to al-Qaeda. The second official added that though we believe the strike did not kill the original target, we believe the person to be al-Qaeda. According to the Post, residents of the Syrian village targeted in the U.S. strike identified the victim as Lotfi Hassan Misto, a 56-year-old farmer and father of 10. They told the newspaper that the man was watching over his flock of sheep when he was killed by a Hellfire missile. Family members and neighbors insist that Misto had no connection to any militant group. If they claim that he's a terrorist, or that they got someone from al-Qaeda, they're all liars, Misto's brother told the Post. U.S. Central Command spokesman Michael Lawhorn said the military takes all such allegations seriously and is investigating to determine whether or not the action may have unintentionally resulted in harm to civilians. When provided with coordinates for the site of the strike, which landed near Misto's home and chicken farm, an unnamed defense official told the Post the location is a known area of interest to al-Qaeda. Local residents disputed that claim, insisting that terrorists do not live or operate near Misto's home. The Pentagon was previously forced to admit that a similar drone strike in Kabul in 2021, in which 10 people were killed, was a tragic mistake. The U.S. initially claimed it had killed a high-level Islamic State, IS, formerly ISIS/ISIL, militant, but later acknowledged that the raid killed civilians. Korean Peninsula on brink of explosion, Pyongyang. The warning comes as Washington and Seoul gear up for their biggest joint exercise so far. Washington's joint military exercises with South Korea and Japan are pushing the region closer to an armed conflict, North Korea said on Friday. The warning comes as the U.S. and Seoul prepare to conduct their largest ever drills. The state-run Korean Central News Agency, KCNA, said the situation on the Korean Peninsula was on the brink of explosion, describing the US-led war games as taking on a more undisguised and dangerous nature. The agency said Pyongyang views the exercises designed to simulate a war scenario as a threat to its security. An exercise for annihilating a nuclear power is just sheer bullshit, KCNA said, referring to the North Korean strategic arsenal. It is a legitimate right of a sovereign country to equip itself with more powerful self-defensive means in order to cope with the prevailing grave situation and prospective threats, the agency said, warning that Washington and Seoul would face corresponding responses. Next week, the US and South Korea will launch their largest ever combined live-fire exercise to mark the 70th anniversary of their alliance and the 75th anniversary of South Korea's armed forces. Divided into 5 phases, the drill will take place between May 25 and June 15. It will involve F-35A fighter jets and A-64 Apache attack helicopters, as well as tanks and multiple rocket launchers, according to Seoul-based news agency Yonhap. The U.S. insists that such exercises demonstrate Washington's commitment to defend its ally from a potential North Korean attack. Cops under